On our newscast tonight, the THAAD missile defense system was not part of the discussion as the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States met here in Seoul today. South Korean activists have resumed their anti-Pyongyang leaflet campaign. Seoul's unification ministry says there's no change in its position that the government cannot stop the activity. Pyongyang slams the campaign, saying it will respond with military strikes. And Samsung launches its latest Galaxy S6 smartphones, and it comes on the same day the Apple Watch goes on pre-order. Coincidence? These stories and more coming up. Welcome to our newscast on this Friday, April 10th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
We begin with the talks between the defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States that took place today.
Right, that was the hot potato, but there were no talks on Washington's possible deployment of that missile defense system on the Korean soil.
But China is already strongly opposing the issue, saying it will destabilize regional security. Na Hyung-kyung starts us off.
South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-gu met with visiting U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter in Seoul on Friday. At a joint press conference following the meeting, the first question asked was whether they had talked either officially or unofficially about deploying Washington's missile defense system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to South Korea.
There has not been any decision made by the U.S. government, and neither has there been any consultation regarding the deployment of THAAD between the two governments.
When asked why the two did not discuss it, Carter said it's simply not the time for it yet.
This is a program that is in production in the United States. We're not at the point yet of determining where it might be suitably deployed in the future.
That indicates the topic could be raised if and when the time is right. For now, the two chiefs said they had reaffirmed Seoul and Washington's commitment to deepening collaboration in new domains like space and cyberspace. They also talked about strengthening trilateral military information sharing between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo to more effectively deter North Korean nuclear and missile provocations. It looks like the controversy and speculation over THAAD will continue even after Carter leaves Seoul tomorrow. He will be heading to Hawaii, where he is scheduled to visit U.S. Pacific Command. Na Hyung-kyung, Arirang News.
It looks like copies of The Interview, the comedy movie about assassinating Kim Jong-un, have crossed into North Korea. South Korean activists have resumed their attempts to send anti-Pyongyang leaflets and movies across the border, despite North Korea's warnings that such acts would be answered by military strikes. For details, here's our Hwang Sung-hee.
Thursday's attempt to fly anti-North Korea leaflets turned out to be a failure. Police stopped a South Korean civic group from sending 300,000 leaflets and 100,000 copies of the movie The Interview, a black comedy that depicts an assassination attempt on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
We wouldn't fly the leaflets if Kim Jong-un apologized or showed remorse for the torpedo attack on the South Korean warship Cheonan.
This group, led by North Korean defector turned activist Park Sang-hak, called off a planned leaflet launch last month amid concerns over public safety. 2 weeks later, with no apology from North Korea materializing, he's decided the launches must continue. However, another civic group beat him to it and successfully launched anti-Pyongyang leaflets and DVDs of The Interview last Saturday. South Korea's unification ministry said Friday there have been no changes to its position on the controversial activity.
The government will resolve the issue of the leaflet launches with a balanced position on guaranteeing the basic rights of the people and protecting the residents in the border region.
North Korea fired machine guns at air balloons launched by South Korean activists in October last year. The regime has consistently warned that future launches from the south would be answered in the same way. But with the balloon activists vowing to continue their launches until North Korea guarantees freedom of press among other demands, tensions on the border are expected to flare up again. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, things are getting worse for North Koreans as humanitarian aid from the international community has been drying up, mainly due to rising fears over Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Kim Ji-yeon takes a closer look into the dire situation of the impoverished regime.
North Korea's most vulnerable people are suffering more than ever. United Nations report on the country shows that roughly 18 million people, or 70% of the population, is classified as food insecure. Also, a quarter of the population has no access to vaccines and basic medical treatment. 7 million people lack access to clean water and proper sanitation, crucial in preventing malnutrition and disease. In addition, more than 350,000 pregnant women are suffering from life-threatening conditions due to a lack of supplies and services. In response to the dire situation, the UN has created a 5-year plan to address the situation. But there's one big problem: a lack of funds. The global body estimates $111 million will be needed to fund crucial humanitarian needs this year alone. Humanitarian aid to the country has dwindled to less than $50 million last year. That's around 80% less than the amount North Korea received from UN agencies in 2004. Pyongyang's tighter restrictions on humanitarian workers are to blame, according to Ghulam Isakai, the UN resident coordinator for North Korea. He says the sanctions imposed on the regime are a big stumbling block to providing humanitarian aid. Isakai says that donors are becoming increasingly reluctant to provide more aid because of fears over the regime's nuclear ambitions. For the same reason, South Korea's humanitarian aid to the north also declined to $50 million last year from $300 million in 2004. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Let's come back to South Korea. President Park Geunhye will embark on a 4-nation tour of South America next week. The presidential office says she will depart for Colombia, Peru, Chile, and Brazil on April 16th. Meeting with the leaders of Korea's 4 major Pacific Rim partners in the region, President Park will seek to strengthen relations beyond the economy to include healthcare, education, defense, and ICT. Korean business leaders will have an opportunity to network with their South American counterparts, and there will also be cultural events to promote Korean pop culture. April 16th also marks the 1-year anniversary of the Seoul ferry disaster, which killed more than 300 people. The president is expected to attend a memorial ceremony for the ferry victims that day before departing for South America. Prosecutors have found a list of names of current and former politicians who allegedly took bribes from a businessman under investigation who committed suicide this week. Former Gyeongnam Enterprises chairman Sung Wan-jong, who was suspected of embezzling government subsidies and company funds, left a list of names and bribes he claimed to have delivered to key figures in the current administration around the time of the ruling party's primary in 2007. Included in the list are Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu and the current presidential chief of staff Lee Byung-gi, as well as former chief of staff Kim Ki-chun and Heo Tae-yeol. The prosecutor general is reported to have ordered an investigation into the authenticity of the list. All those named in the list have denied the allegations. We may finally have a face to put with the man suspected of starting a fire in the Korean Cultural Center in Tokyo last month. Japanese police say they are questioning a 39-year-old man on charges of trespassing and destruction of someone else's premises. Authorities added they did not add an arson charge because the suspect lit the fire, but it did not lead to arson. While the suspect denies the charges, he is expected to be taken into the custody of the prosecution on Sunday for further questioning. A surveillance camera caught images of an unidentified person fleeing after setting fire to the wall of the building on the night of March 25th.
The highly anticipated Galaxy S6 smartphones are now on sale, and by drawing avid tech users to mobile retailers with the device, Samsung Electronics is seeking to reclaim its title as the #1 smartphone brand. Connie Kim files this report.
With the launch of its flagship Galaxy S6 series, Samsung is eyeing to regain its position at the top of the smartphone market. The Korean tech titan has dubbed the development of these new phones Project Zero, signaling the company was starting from scratch in its mission to revive its flagging market share. Designers ditched the plastic body in favor of more stylish metal and glass. But the biggest draws are the wireless charging feature and the launch of Samsung Pay, the company's new mobile payment system.
Design-wise, I think it's superior. I like the new camera most of all. I'm thinking of buying Samsung's new smartphone. I like the new features such as the wireless charging.
The market consensus is that in the year following the launch, sales of the Galaxy S6 will reach 50 million units. That is the largest sales figure ever for a Samsung smartphone, increasing expectations that the Korean handset maker could take the lead in the global market. Samsung lagged behind Apple in the fourth quarter last year, and some experts say it won't be easy for the Korean tech giant to beat its rival.
Market expectations for the Samsung Galaxy 6 are high, but with Apple expected to sell up to 56 million iPhones in the first quarter of the year, we will have to wait to see actual numbers. The size of the smartphone market is limited.
Experts also say Samsung may not be able to meet its goals if the company can't keep up with demand for the curved screens, which are currently in short supply. They recommend Samsung increase its manufacturing capacity to target the American and European markets, where high-end smartphones are extremely popular. Unveiling its new Galaxy S6 series on Thursday, Shin Jong-gyun, the head of Samsung Electronics' mobile division, said the company is working hard to resolve the supply issues, but they could persist for a while. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Moody's Investors Service has raised Korea's credit outlook from stable to positive. The global credit agency attributed on Friday the upward revision to the government doing a better job in managing public debt, a lower vulnerability to shocks in the global financial market, and improvements in the country's overall fiscal health. Despite the upgrade, Korea's overall rating remained at the fourth highest level of Aa3, the same since 2012, and the same as China and Taiwan.
The Korean stock market has been on an upward trend this year, but it's not enough as it pales in comparison to its two Asian neighbors, Japan and China. Oh Jin-joo has the digits to prove it.
Korea's benchmark index has been lagging behind other major Asian stock markets in terms of growth in recent years. The Kospi closed at slightly below 2059 on Thursday, posting a mere 3% rise compared to 3 years ago. Now, that's a stark contrast to the key indices of Japan and China. Over the same period, Japan's Nikkei shot up 108%, while China's Shanghai Composite jumped 73%. And even though Korea's stock market gained some upward momentum this year, its growth paled in comparison to its two Asian neighbors. The Kospi has risen 7.5% this year, but over the same period, Japan and China's stock markets made bigger leaps of 14.3% and 22.4% respectively. Experts say lower than expected earnings at Korean companies since the second quarter of 2012 begin to explain the slow growth. If companies can begin posting earnings that at least meet market expectations, experts believe that the domestic stock market would make a much-needed upward leap. The weak Japanese yen also contributed to the Kospi's relatively slow rise as it hit Korean exporters hard, eroding their price competitiveness against their Japanese rivals. However, many analysts point out that the Korean stock market has been undervalued. According to Morgan Stanley Capital International, the price-earnings ratio, or PER, of the Korean Stock Exchange stands at just 10, ranking at the lowest level among 46 countries as of April 1st. A low ratio means stocks are valued lower than the company's earnings. Oh Jin-joo, Arirang News.
Have you ever heard of pumashi? There's a good chance you haven't, as it is something not many Koreans are familiar with either. It's an old idea about resource sharing in small communities that's faded with the demands of the modern world. But according to our Kwon So-wa, there are efforts to revive this spirit and share it with the rest of the world.
A group of high-level delegates from Korea, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand came together at the National Assembly for a forum on mutual cooperation. In Korea, the concept is known as pumashi, and it's what's behind Koreans' traditional way of life. Village residents would get together, pool their resources, and help one another when they could. These communal actions are much like those in other countries around the world, including Canada. Barry Devlin, a Canadian parliamentarian, says the parallel concept in North America is a barn raising, which for many evokes the idea of a community coming together to help one of its members.
100 years ago or more in Canada and the United States, in farm communities, when one family needed a new barn, a building for the animals, the whole town would come together to help.
H2O, the organizer of Thursday's event, has a special connection with Canada. Group members traveled to the country last year to thank Canadian veterans for their service in the Korean War. Through the Thank You from Korea project, the group seeks to give back to the 21 United Nations members that fought alongside Korean soldiers in the war. The Canadian veterans said they were deeply touched by the meaningful act. The pumashi spirit has been at the center of these projects and will contribute to creating further bonds.
We'd like to develop this movement to other countries in the world. It's to keep the sustainability of the world village and to keep the world village as a peace village.
Thursday's event was the first global pumashi forum, and more are planned, with organizers hoping to revive the valuable but vanishing spirit of pumashi and share it with the world. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
April 10th is a historic day for Arirang TV, the station you're watching right now.
That's right. It marks the 19th year since the Korea International Broadcasting Foundation was established.
And over the years, Arirang has promoted Korea to a global audience through a variety of programs covering a wide range of topics.
That's right. And it's now time to take a brisk look into the past, present, and future of Arirang TV. Arirang TV started off as a domestic cable television channel targeting foreign residents in Korea. In 1999, the station launched its satellite broadcasting service overseas. Now with 8 satellites broadcasting around the world, Arirang is being transmitted to over 100 million households in around 130 countries excluding China. While it was busy evolving into one of the main broadcasters hosting major national events in Korea, the station also managed to provide first-hand coverage of those events for the global community. In February last year, Arirang expanded its platforms abroad by joining the lineup of public interest channels on DirecTV, the largest U.S. satellite television provider. And the Korean broadcaster has not stopped there.
We will launch a 24-hour news channel through UN in-house network from this coming summer. And also we tried many interesting and innovative TV program format. And I would ask you to show your consistent support and affection for Arirang TV.
Arirang is also aiming to boost communication between its program hosts and viewers by incorporating information and communications technology in its Korean cultural programming to meet the ever-growing demand for Hallyu content. The broadcaster also introduced an interactive voting system that's based on a smartphone application. It's the first of its kind for Arirang and allows for the active participation of viewers. What's next for Arirang? To become a true international program provider for viewers around the world with balanced, in-depth coverage of everything Korean, from culture to current affairs. Now it's time to take a look at the leading headlines from around the world with Paul E.
Our focus today, U.S.-Cuba relations on the rise. Hillary Clinton seeks a second shot at the White House, and Apple's first smartwatch goes on display.
So, Paul, let's start with our first story. The United States and Cuba are on a historic path to normalize relations after decades of hostilities. What's the progress on the diplomatic front?
Well, in the latest development, the top American and Cuban diplomats have sat down for talks in the highest level meeting between the two countries since the Cuban Revolution more than half a century ago. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez met in Panama on Thursday. U.S. officials said that the chief envoys had a lengthy discussion and vowed to continue to address outstanding issues. Despite the apparent sign of progress, leading analysts say a major improvement in bilateral ties is still far off.
It is no exaggeration to say that there are hundreds of issues that need to be resolved. There are still many differences. Cuba has suffered from the embargo, terrorism, and unfair treatment, which is the United States' action to list Cuba as a supporter of terrorism. No one else in the international community agrees with that except Washington.
The historic meeting comes ahead of a 35-nation summit of the Americas in Panama today and tomorrow. All eyes are on whether U.S. President Obama and Cuban leader Raul Castro will meet face-to-face on the sidelines. Earlier, in another sign of easing tensions, the State Department recommended that Cuba be removed from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. And after months of growing speculation, former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is reportedly planning to pull the trigger this weekend on her second bid for the White House. According to the New York Daily News, Clinton will likely declare her intention to run on Sunday via social media. Other sources close to Clinton have reportedly also said they are anticipating an immediate announcement. The former senator from New York is widely regarded as the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. Political watchers say Clinton is in a much stronger position than in 2008, when she was eclipsed by her rival, President Barack Obama. Polls from recent months have also shown that she is holding a substantial lead ahead of Republican contenders. And though Samsung is drawing crowds here in Korea with the launch of its new Galaxy phones today, gadget lovers elsewhere in the world are flocking to get a glimpse of Apple's new smartwatch. In Australia, consumers rushed retail stores in Sydney on Friday as the U.S. tech giant put the Apple Watch on display for the first time. Hands-on demos are now available for those interested in pre-orders, which also start today. Apple is marketing the watch as a must-have fashion accessory, but tech experts say luxury brands aren't worried about the competition, at least for now.
This is just Apple's interpretation of the watch. I don't think watchmakers should be worried at all. I don't think the Longines and the TAGs and the Paneris of the world are going to be worried. But this is just Apple's expression where they've combined what they're good at with the fact that it's a watch and style. So I think there's going to be room for everybody.
The Apple Watch is set to go on sale on April 24th at the company's flagship retail locations and at high-end fashion boutiques in cities from Paris and London to Tokyo and Beijing. Ahead of Friday's launch, Apple said it expects to completely sell out of its initial supply within the first 24 hours. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here on Monday.
Well, we had a very pleasant Friday afternoon today, and even now, Yeouido Park and Seokchon Lake are packed with people enjoying spring flower festivals. But if you're not able to check them out today, don't be too disappointed. We have an even balmier and sunnier weekend ahead of us. Temperatures around the nation, including here in the capital, will hover above 20 on both Saturday and Sunday. But the cherry blossoms have reached peak bloom, and there's a light rain in the forecast nationwide early next week, which could force the blossoms off the trees. So this weekend should be the best time to see them before they all disappear. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. The capital will kick off with a low of 6, while the highs will soar to 21. And Gwangju and Busan will hike up to 23 and 17 respectively. And as for the other regions, it looks like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 21 and 16, while Dokdo rises to 12. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And that wraps up our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next week.